Picture this. The night air of Port Royal hangs thick with salt and sweat. The distant echoes of drunken songs fade beneath the heavy creak of gallows ropes swaying in the dark. 3 women stand beneath them, accused of desertion, witchcraft, and worse. Their faces, pale and defiant, stare into the abyss of dawn, knowing it will be their last. And there, hidden in the shadows, stands Blackbeard. Not the legend, not the monster, but the man, watching, silent, with eyes that have seen more, betrayals and broken oaths than any sailor dares confess. What pulled him there that night? Mercy, coin, or something else? Something only whispered about in pirate stories long after the rum runs dry. Tonight, you'll hear a tale stitched with fear, guilt, and a decision that still haunts the sea. Welcome to the channel The Pirate's Diary. If tales of pirates, lost oaths, and cursed gold stir something in you, the sea keeps its stories, but only for those who dare to remember. Will you join the crew? Subscribe and step aboard. The air that night tasted of salt, sweat, and something far worse. The square near the docks of Port Royal had seen its share of grim spectacles, but tonight felt different. A restless murmur moved through the crowd, half drunk, half starved for some twisted entertainment. Coins passed from calloused hands to greedy palms, each bet more careless than the last. Who would cry first? Who would break before the rope did its work? 3 figures stood on the gallows, necks already pressed by rough loops of hemp, shadows swallowing their faces. Lantern light flickered against their skin, making their eyes look hollow, distant, already halfway to the other side. The first, Maria, skin like dark mahogany, her hair stiff with dried salt, lips cracked but still curled in defiance. They said she had ended a merchant's life with nothing but a broken bottle and a stare that could turn blood cold. But no one cared to ask why. Next stood Elena, small, pale, barely more than a girl. Her hands shook as she fought the tears, but the mark on her shoulder told the story the crowd wanted, a burned symbol, branded for witchcraft. Her real crime, knowing how to read, how to heal, how to frighten small men with old herbs and whispered prayers. And then there was Isla, tall, shoulders wide from years of marching under the Spanish sun. A deserter, they said. Her old uniform still clung to her like a second skin, ripped, stained with dirt, and someone else's. Blood. The crowd didn't cheer for her as much. Soldiers always carried a kind of curse when they swung. And in the middle of it all, leaning against a crooked post, silent as a shadow, stood Blackbeard. No one knew when he'd arrived, no footsteps, no warning, just there, like smoke in your lungs before you smell the fire. His eyes didn't flinch. They scanned each of the women, slow, measuring, the kind of look that settled somewhere between judgment and something far heavier, recognition. The executioner pulled the lever once to test the ropes. Wood creaked. The crowd roared. But before the trapdoors could snap open, a voice cut through the noise like steel through wet cloth. "Untie them." Silence. The executioner froze, turning slowly, disbelief written all over his face. "You buying 'em, or just looking to stir trouble, Teach?" Blackbeard stepped forward, his boots crushing the dirt beneath him like it owed him something. Without a word, he reached inside his coat and pulled out a velvet pouch, the kind that never held small change. The silver hit the ground with a sound that shut every mouth in the square. "I'm not here to watch others hang for sins they didn't commit," he said, low, slow, as if every syllable weighed more than gold. No one dared argue, not with him. Ropes came loose. The women stumbled forward, their legs too weak to hold them. Maria caught herself first, her glare sharp enough to cut. Elena collapsed to her knees, coughing, gasping like a shipwrecked soul breaking the surface for air. Isla. She just stood there, staring at Blackbeard, like she'd seen him before, or dreamt of him in the nights before this one. Blackbeard didn't speak again. He simply turned, walking back toward the shadows that had given him form, as if rescuing 3 strangers from death was just another line in the diary he never let anyone read. But those who watched him that night, they knew better. Some debts are paid with coin, others with memories that never let you sleep again. By the time the moon reached its highest point, the 3 women found themselves aboard a ship that didn't even carry a name. Blackbeard's sloop cut through the dark waters like a blade through wet cloth. Silent, fast, and unseen by most who mattered. The crew said nothing as the women climbed aboard, just stood there, lined along the deck, their faces hard and unreadable, eyes following every shaky step like wolves sizing up wounded prey. No one asked questions, not out loud. But suspicion hung thicker than the mist rolling off the sea. Blackbeard didn't waste words. He stood near the mainmast, coat heavy with salt and wind, his voice low and cold as the ocean beneath them. "You breathe now," he said, looking at them without emotion, like he was seeing something else entirely, something far away. "Let's see what you do with it." And with that, he turned, leaving them standing alone with their confusion, their fear, and the weight of a second chance that didn't feel like mercy. The sea stretched out around them, endless and black. No stars, no shoreline, just water swallowing every direction like it wanted them back. Below deck, the 3 women sat with their backs pressed against the cold wooden beams, each keeping her distance from the others, each too tired to cry, too numb to speak, too unsure if they had truly been saved, or simply traded from one cage to another. Maria clenched her fists, staring at the ceiling, replaying every moment she'd spent with a rope around her neck. Elena pulled her knees to her chest, whispering words no one else could hear. Small prayers, or maybe just pieces of old songs meant to quiet her own heart. Isla. She just stared at the door, unblinking, like a soldier waiting for the next order or the next fight. Above them at the helm, Blackbeard stood alone, both hands gripping the wheel with knuckles pale and tight. His coat flapped with every gust, but he didn't move, didn't blink. Eyes fixed on the horizon like a man trying to outrun something only he could see. A ship with no name, carrying too many ghosts, and 3 more souls who didn't yet understand the price of surviving. That night, the sky over the Caribbean split wide open. Thunder rolled like cannon fire across the waves, and the sea rose with a kind of hunger none aboard had seen in weeks. Black clouds twisted above, dragging the stars out of sight, leaving the ship alone, small, and at the mercy of something far bigger than any man. The sloop groaned under the weight of each wave. The mast bent like it might snap clean in 2. Sails thrashed, ropes tore free, and cold rain hammered down hard enough to strip skin. Most of the crew fought with practiced hands, pulling lines, shouting over the storm. But not everyone stayed below. Isla, with her soldier's muscles and steady eyes, climbed up from the hold, boots slipping on wet wood. She didn't wait for orders. Without a word, she grabbed a coil of rope and threw herself into the chaos, tying down sails, fighting the wind like it was just another enemy. Every knot she tied held the ship together for another breath, another moment. Below deck, Maria crouched low near the storage barrels, both hands tight around the handle of a small dagger she'd hidden since the gallows. Her lips moved in silent prayers, but her eyes stayed open, sharp, ready for anyone foolish enough to come at her in the dark. And Elena, shaking, drenched to the bone, crawled along the floor of the captain's quarters, gathering fallen maps and scattered charts. Her hands smoothed the wet parchment, trying to press them flat, like saving the ship's memory before it could wash away. Above them all, Blackbeard stood at the helm, coat whipping like a broken sail, his grip on the wheel steady, eyes narrowed, watching every soul aboard. He said nothing, not during the worst of it, not when the mast cracked like splitting bone, not when the deck tilted so far it felt like they'd slide straight into the black mouth of the sea. Only when the first pale light of dawn touched the waves, when the storm finally loosened its grip, did he speak. A low voice, rough as stone, but with something in it that hadn't been there before. "Good," he muttered, barely louder than the wind. "You're useful." And with that, he turned away, leaving them to wonder if they'd just survived the sea, or something far more dangerous. By the third day at sea, with their water barrels running low and tempers running thinner, Blackbeard gave the order to drop anchor near a small stretch of land that didn't appear on any map. The island lay west of Tortuga, a forgotten patch of earth swallowed by mist and silence. No name, no markings, just dense green pressing against the shoreline like it didn't want to be found. The crew muttered among themselves. But when Blackbeard chose the landing party, no one argued. He took a handful of trusted men and the 3 women. The air ashore was thick, wet, the kind that clung to your lungs like regret. Branches scraped at their skin as they pushed deeper into the jungle. Roots twisted like broken bones underfoot. Every step felt like trespass. It wasn't long before they found it. An old fort, half sunken into the earth. Stone walls crumbling beneath layers of moss and dirt. What once stood as protection now sagged like a dying thing giving into time. The gates hung crooked, the smell of rot curling out from the shadows inside. Maria moved first, following some instinct that kept her alive longer than most. Her fingers brushed against cold iron, rusted chains hammered deep into the walls, links thick enough to hold men, or something worse. Isla crouched near a dark stain on the floor, dragging her fingertips across it, dried, dark, and too thick to be anything but what they feared. Her eyes stayed hard, but her jaw tightened. Elena, delicate as she looked, stepped toward a corner where old books lay scattered like broken promises. She lifted one, a leather-bound journal, its pages soft with mold, words blurred by years of damp air. Her voice trembled as she read aloud, only a whisper, almost afraid the walls might still be listening. "They weren't shipwrecked," she said, flipping through brittle pages with shaking hands. "Not by sea, by fear." The words hung in the air, heavier than the humidity, heavier than the heat. Blackbeard stood at the entrance, arms crossed, eyes distant. His gaze didn't settle on the chain, or the blood, or even the journal. He looked at the far corner, the one still swallowed in shadow, as if seeing something no one else could, or remembering something he'd spent years trying to forget. No one dared speak his name in that moment, not even the crew, because every man aboard knew some islands stayed off the maps for a reason. That night, after the island had vanished behind them like a bad dream swallowed by the fog, the whispers began. The crew spoke low, voices sharp with fear, but dull with exhaustion. They said the island was cursed, a place where sailors went to disappear, where the ground remembered every footstep and the air still carried the last screams of men long gone. Some called it a grave. Others called it a warning. Below deck, away from their voices, Blackbeard sat alone at a narrow table, a half-empty bottle near his elbow, a single lantern casting thin light across the stained wood. Before him lay something that barely passed for a map. No coastlines, no ports, just a rough piece of parchment, edges curled and brittle, marked with coordinates scrawled in a hand more desperate than steady. And at the bottom, 7 words written like a wound that never closed, where debts are paid in flesh. His eyes didn't blink. His hands didn't move. Only the slow rise and fall of his chest betrayed the weight pressing down on him. From the far corner of the room, soft footsteps. Elena, standing just inside the doorway, hands clutching the damp fabric of her dress. "You knew that island," she said, voice barely louder than the creak of the ship. Blackbeard didn't look up, didn't offer a lie or an excuse. "I left men there once," he said, flat, cold, as if dragging the words out of somewhere he'd buried deep. Didn't look back. The silence that followed felt colder than the sea air leaking through the ship's seams. Eleanor didn't ask for more. She turned, disappeared back into the shadows without another word. But later that night, when no one was watching, she tore the last page from the journal they'd found in the fort, folded it, and slipped it beneath her dress, against her skin, as if keeping someone else's nightmare close would make her own feel smaller. Above deck, Blackbeard remained at the table, staring at the parchment long after the lantern burned out. By the 5th night, the danger finally showed its face, but it didn't come from the sea or from some distant ship on the horizon. It came from below deck, from within. Kellen, one of Blackbeard's own crew, a man with too much rum in his gut and too little sense in his head, found Maria alone near the water barrels. The air was thick, the ship swaying just enough to make balance a challenge, but Kellen didn't need steady legs to be dangerous. His knife hung low at his side, fingers twitching, eyes glazed, but the words spilling from his mouth left no doubt about his intent. Slurred threats, bitter laughter, the kind that left no room for misunderstanding. Maria backed herself, against the wall, one hand slipping toward her hidden dagger, but she wasn't fast enough. Before Kellen could take another step, Isla appeared. No warning, no sound, just there, like the snap of a storm breaking overhead. A boarding axe in her grip, not the sharp edge, but the blunt side swinging fast and hard, straight into Kellen's skull. The crack echoed through the hold, sudden and final. He dropped like wet rope, sprawling across the floorboards, unmoving, except for the slow, pathetic twitch of his fingers. By the time Blackbeard arrived, footsteps heavy, coat still wet from the night air, Kellen was already out cold. For a long moment, Blackbeard said nothing. His eyes moved from Isla, standing over the body, chest heaving, hair plastered to her face, to Maria, still pressed against the wall, her breath sharp and shallow. Then, finally, his voice, cold, low, and slow as a rising tide. "Throw him overboard," Isla said, without looking at him, as if daring him to argue, but Blackbeard's gaze lingered on her longer than it should have, something unreadable flickering behind those dark eyes. "No," he said, almost soft, but colder than steel. "Let him wake." A pause. "Let him remember why he fears me." And with that, he turned, walking back toward the upper deck as if none of it surprised him. By dawn, Kellen was gone. No one pushed him, no one chased. At the first sight of land on the horizon, he jumped. Some said he swam for hours, never looking back. The fear of Blackbeard weighing heavier than the sea itself. By the 7th day, the rumors had traveled faster than any ship. Word reached Port Nassau long before Blackbeard's sloop touched the docks. The streets were already thick with whispers, voices curling like smoke through the taverns and market stalls. 3 women aboard his ship, no chains, no contracts, no reasons given. The merchants sneered behind their ledgers. The tavern owners lowered their voices as he passed. Even captains, men who had once shared drinks with him, now watched from doorways with narrowed eyes. A man like him, with 3 women aboard, and not one of them bound by coin or promise? Something's wrong with that. By sunset, the summons came. The magistrate wanted words. Blackbeard entered the hall alone, shoulders broad beneath his weather-beaten coat, boots leaving muddy prints across the cracked floorboards. The room stank of damp wood and old lies, sea charts curling at the edges, flags hanging limp like forgotten warnings. No official charges, just whispers spoken loud enough for him to hear. Kidnapping, witchcraft, harboring fugitives, breaking the quiet order Nassau liked to pretend it had. They sat above him, hidden behind their ledgers and rusted swords, hoping their questions would rattle him. Blackbeard said nothing for most of it, standing still, letting the weight of the room press against him like a rising tide. Only when the oldest among them, a merchant captain with more silver in his beard than truth in his mouth, dared suggest that Blackbeard explain himself. Did he speak just once, low, steady, and with the kind of finality that ended conversations before they started? I don't answer to cowards. No more words, no apologies, no explanations. When he stepped outside, the sun was already low, bleeding gold and red across the docks. And there they stood, Maria, blade drawn, her eyes daring anyone to speak first. Isla, axe in hand, jaw tight, shoulders squared. Even Elena, holding a short dagger like it weighed more than she could carry, but refusing to lower it. 3 women, shoulder to shoulder, without orders, without fear, waiting for the first fool to make a move. No one did, because some storms you can see coming, and others you feel in your bones, long before the first strike falls. That night, the fire came without warning. The old tavern at the corner of the docks, the very place where the whispers had started, where men drank and traded poison. Behind Blackbeard's back was swallowed by flames before the first bell of midnight. Wood cracked, windows burst, smoke poured like a curse into the streets of Nassau. By the time anyone noticed, it was too late. No one saw who lit the match. Some pointed their trembling fingers at Blackbeard, said he walked out of the shadows with fire in his hands and silence on his lips. Others swore it was the women, 3 shadows slipping through alleys, ghosts with unfinished business. But when the first rays of dawn touched the harbor, the only truth left behind was ashes and an empty berth where Blackbeard's ship had been. The sloop had already vanished, sails stretched wide, cutting toward open water like it had somewhere urgent to be. At the stern, Isla stood with her axe resting across her shoulder, grinding its edge smooth against whetstone, eyes fixed on the sea, muscles tense like she was still waiting for a fight that hadn't come. Near the gunwale, Maria worked with shaking hands, but steady ones, loading pistols, checking powder, her lips pressed tight in silent focus. And Elena, sitting cross-legged on the deck, her lantern flickering in the wind, sketching new coastlines and hidden routes into a battered journal. Her fingers stained with ink, her eyes with something deeper, something the others hadn't yet seen. Above them all, at the helm, Blackbeard stood like a statue carved from storm clouds and regret, his gaze locked on the horizon, not speaking, not smiling, just watching, like he knew that whatever waited out there, whatever debts, curses, or old ghosts, it would find them soon enough. Weeks passed, like slow bruises spreading across the sky. The ship cut through squalls that tore at the sails, drifted through dead waters where the air hung thick and still, and crossed stretches of sea where sharks circled like they were waiting for names to fall overboard. The crew began to change, in ways no one spoke of. Some left at the next port, their eyes hollow, their hands shaking more than the rum could explain. They said they wanted quieter ships, captains without shadows, journeys where curses didn't whisper in the rigging at night. Others stayed, drawn by something they couldn't name. something that settled in their bones and made sleep come slower with each passing night. On one morning, soft and pale, with the sun bleeding low against the waves, Blackbeard stood at the bow, motionless, as if listening to something beneath the water, something only he could hear. His coat hung heavy with salt, his face carved deep with lines the sea had left behind. The horizon stretched out ahead of him, endless and silent, like a door half open, but never inviting. Behind him, soft footsteps. Elena. Her journal, tattered, pages smeared with ink and seawater, rested in her hands, her voice steady, but not kind. "We don't owe you," she said. Blackbeard didn't turn, didn't blink. He simply nodded once, slow, as if agreeing with something much older than her words. "You don't." That was all. Behind them, Maria laughed for the first time in days. Not the kind of laugh that came easy, but sharp, like breaking glass. A sound that didn't belong on the open sea. But there it was, raw and alive. Isla stood near the rigging, hands working the lines with practiced force, her voice rising in an old Spanish song. One sailors sang when the difference between death and freedom blurred beyond recognition. Below deck, forgotten by most, a piece of rope hung limp in the corner of the storage hold. The same rope that once pulled tight around their necks, its fibers still stained with dirt and sweat, curled like something waiting for a reason to matter again. The sea didn't forget, neither did they. And Blackbeard, he sailed on, without apology, without answers, with 3 souls aboard who owed him nothing. And somehow, in a way only the sea could understand, that was the only thing that mattered. Some say he's still out there, chasing debts he'll never collect, carrying the weight of names he never speaks, steering his ship through waters where the past is never buried, just drowned. But those who were there, the ones who stood on that deck, with shaking hands and salt-cracked lips, they know better. The sea takes what it wants, and sometimes it leaves just enough behind to make you remember. Did you already know this forgotten part of the story? And if you had been on that ship, what would you have done? What other sea stories deserve to be told here? If this story touched you in any way, don't let it vanish like so many other names the sea has taken. Subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications to keep hearing what was never meant to be forgotten.